these in conjunction. Awesome. So good. It's good practice. Now there are certain scenarios where you can actually get away with just using cover tape to connect two pieces of liner. A lot of the times that's going to be for something like an overlap. It's a great scenario because as you go through this process, you're going to see it's pretty simple to just slap some cover tape on with some of the primer and stuff. But in some cases, if we're doing a seam that's going to be, say, a couple feet underwater, I'm going to want to actually add this as an extra precaution into the scenario, right? So even though this is watertight, this is just that much better. So with EPDM, basically this is stuff that's usually used for roofing materials, right? So like Jeff was saying earlier today, we had a guy come out who's been in the roofing industry for over 30 years, so probably one of the most experienced people in the world to kind of come in and teach us these techniques. So I'm going to teach you guys kind of what was applicable that he taught us to the pond world, okay? So the first thing here is what we're going to have is two different pieces of liner. The two pieces of liner need to be connected. So for those of you who haven't done this before, the idea of a seam is to basically take the two pieces of liner, make sure they're connected, make sure they're watertight. It can go 100% underwater, meaning we're watertight, right? Does that all make sense? Kind of where we're going? So what we do is I'm going to go through some of the materials. Got the EPDM liner, got the double-sided seam tape. This is something that we sell. We got the cover tape. The difference here is this is almost like a double-sided sticky tape. This is one-sided, where the other side is a nice kind of linery material. Meaning if I was to put this on top of everything, I can step on it and my foot's not going to stick to it, right? Those are the two main things. The other thing we have right here is our EPDM Tape Primer Plus. So this stuff is super important. This is going to prep your surfaces. Well, it's going to be part of the preparation of the surface to make sure this stuff attaches properly. Okay, you can't do it without it. The other thing, which is new to our line, so if you guys have done this before, you probably haven't used this product, this is surface prep. So basically this is going to make sure that your liner is really, really clean before any of this stuff happens. So how many of you have had to go work on an old project where the liner's all tainted, all messed up, and it's got like those rust stains on it and stuff? You guys know what I'm talking about? How hard is it to scrub that stuff off of there if you've had to do a patch or something? It's like impossible, right? So one of the things that we've added to our lineup this year is these two things right here. So we haven't really used these that much in the past. You guys might have to clean things up, but we're really starting to use them now, which is just a scrub pad. And the other thing is a surface prep. So what we like to do is use the scrub pad, the surface prep, and really prep that liner up. One of the things that this actually does is it starts to open the pores of the liner enough to where this primer actually likes to adhere a little bit better. So it just gives us that much more of an adhesion between the different surfaces we're trying to connect. Okay? With that being said, the other things that I have on the table here, we've got a roller. It doesn't always apply because a lot of times, you guys know, in the field with the soil and stuff under your liner, it's going to be hard to get this roller to work in every scenario. If you can, this is a best practice. We're going to take this and roll it over the top of all those seams that we're doing, and it's really going to make sure that all this stuff seats down properly for 100% water seal. The other things we got some cups that are going to be disposable, so we can pour our materials in there without actually having these open all the time. So the more that we can keep this stuff closed, the better it's going to be for the material itself, for the product. But also, we don't want to waste a bunch of it, right? Like, if I leave this open and a guy kicks it over, and that's the only can you have on site, that's a problem, because then your job's extended until you get this stuff back on job site, right? So we have these, we got the roller, we got the utility knife, right? So whatever knife you guys are used to, these were nice and easy for us to get, so we could use these for today. Stir sticks, sometimes this is important. If you guys have used stuff, it's even more important. If this has been opened already, there's a certain shelf life on this. I think it's a year, right? So it's about, is it about a year? Yep. So it's about a year. With that said, once we get close to that shelf life, you're probably going to want to replace this. This is a small can. We like to keep it small because we don't use it a lot, but you guys might have it on your truck. Just remember, there's about a year's shelf life on this. We're going to want to replace it so we're not using bad material. If it's already been opened, probably want to have a stir stick. If it's brand new, you're probably going to be pretty good. You can kind of hear it jiggling around in there, right? the longer it sits after it's open and exposed to air, it starts to goop up and get more gummy. The gummier it is, the more you're going to have to stir it to break it up and make sure everything's mixed up, okay? A couple of other things, you could use your knife if you have one, but sometimes a paint can opener, something to open the cans with. You guys don't have these, but I just want to point this out. When I'm applying today with this pad, you guys could do the same things with some of this material in some cases. This is best case scenario. This is what the roofers use. But what happens when we're on a job site? We don't always have all the materials we need, do we? So sometimes it comes down to, do you have fabric? All right, we're going to make that work, right? Do you not have the stir stick? All right, I'm going to shake it up pretty good to make that work. So just keep in mind, we're talking best practices. We can kind of go back from there, but best practice always produces the best results. And I think that's it. And then some rags and stuff, right? So heavy duty rags, you could use the fabric for stuff like this too. So if you have extra fabric on site, just cut it off, that'll work. So basically what we're gonna be doing is something like this. So you can see this seam we've got right here. We did this about 24 hours ago. So one cool thing that we're gonna do is try to pull on it a little bit at the end here to kind of tell the difference between a fresh seam and one that's done over 24 hours. There is a cure time for this stuff, guys. So when we're done seaming, I don't expect you guys to be able to yank on this as hard as you can and not have it pull off. That's not how seaming surfaces work, right? Basically, as it cures, it's going to become stronger, and sometimes it takes up to 48 hours. So it should be watertight. Usually we can do this in the same day. We're going to have water on top of this liner. However, does that mean you should go out there and start trying to rip it off and expect it to hold a, 100 PSI if you're pulling on it? Not happening. And in reality, really, when you're doing, another quick tip is when you're doing liner seaming, these are only supposed to take about 10 pounds of pressure before it should start releasing. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but should there ever be forced pressure pulling outward on these? Think about it, water's pushing down, it's constantly pushing down on this and forcing the pressure the opposite way. So in reality, we're really never going to see a real world scenario where it's pulling. It's always going to actually be pushing on it in our scenario, okay? All right, so any questions up to this point on any of the materials, anything? No? Pretty straightforward? So what I want to do is just kind of go through a quick example of how we would do a seam. Probably have one guy out here with me to give me a hand, so anybody, any takers, yeah, come on over. It's always good to have a couple of guys, extra hands and stuff. A lot of the times when we're doing seams out in the field, we'll actually have clamps. We'll have all kinds of stuff on the truck to make sure that if I need liner pressure this way, then I'm gonna have a clamp holding something. I'm gonna clamp it to boards. Sometimes we have boards that go underneath the liner temporarily to make sure that we can actually make our connections and the seams properly. So we might have, say, a 2x8 or a 2x12, and it might be about 8 inches, 12 inches wide by, say, 8 feet long, right? And that gives us the ability to make a nice flat surface that's going to bridge across whatever pond shape we're working. So if it's a stream, you can have a nice flat surface just like the table. When we're in a pond, it's a lot more difficult. So you guys are going to do this, you'll be like, seams are easy if you've never done it. When you get into the pond, it's going to be a little more difficult to do because we're working with the shape of the pond, we're working with soil, we're working with folds in the liner, all kinds of weird stuff, okay? So just take that mental note. It's going to be super easy today. It's going to be more difficult when you try to do it in the field. And so this experience is going to help you guys to make that process a little bit simpler when you're out there trying to do it in the real world, okay? All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I have my 2 pieces of liner, right? So this is whatever scenario it is, we're going to take a look and we're going to have an overlap happening. So basically I have my 2 pieces of liner, one's here. I need to make sure that this is coming over the top here. Now you guys have your little rolls of the double-sided tape. You can see they're not super wide. So what I need to do is make sure I at least have that much space to do this overlap in. Sometimes it's nice to actually do it and have a little bit of a reveal of this, but I'll show you how we get there as we go. So I have enough space or enough overlap here. I can do a little extra if I want, that's totally fine. What I'm gonna do though is kind of have that set up And I'm gonna start shaking my can. So if you wanna shake that a little bit, make sure you hold the top so it doesn't pop off. Surface prep. So the surface prep is gonna start cleaning all of this off. So if you're out in the field, it might be a little bit different. You might clean a certain section, and then you might clean the next section and kind of move through the process. You can see this liner is super dirty, right? That's gonna fail your seam right there, right? So the idea is to basically use this stuff to remove all of the debris, whether it's dust, whatever contaminants. There's formica dust that they put on the liner when it's manufactured to make sure that it doesn't stick to itself, right? So when that's on there, it's great for the manufacturing and the placing. It's no harm to the fish or anything. However, when we go to make a seal, we want to try to remove that. So you can do it with water. It might work a little bit. The surface prep is going to be 110% better if you're able to use this stuff, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do, got that stuff shaken up, right? Shake it pretty hard. Shake it. Yep. Want to make sure it's all mixed up. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. We do have gloves. I'm not used to using them, but this surface prep stuff is pretty intense, so make sure you guys don't get it on your hands. All right. So I'm just going to pour a little bit of this in here. It's all right if it gets on there. So I'm going to take my rag. This stuff is super flammable, so guys, don't light cigarettes, don't do stuff like that. If you're trying to use it, probably not going to end well. So I'm going to dip that. So for this scenario, this brand new liner, you can just use a rag. It's going to work great. So just take a look at kind of how quickly this cleans. Evaporates pretty quick, so it's going to allow you to get back to your job as quick as possible. I'm cleaning both surfaces that we're actually going to make that seam on. So the double-sided, remember there's two pieces of liner, they're getting seamed together, and it's one on top of the other. When it comes to the cover tape, we're actually seaming over the top of that piece that's overlapping, right? So it's a little bit different. So what I need to do is have this folded back, and I'm also going to do something called a tack back. So if you guys have done this before, great. If not, hopefully this is a little trick that might help a little bit in some scenarios. So again, having multiple hands is nice, but sometimes it's just you and you're doing a seam or a patch or something, you might need help. So all the little tricks you can take into mind might help you out. So open my can here. So if you guys have never used primer before, I don't know if you can see it, super black, right? It's goopy. Don't get it on your hands. Because well, actually, if you haven't got it on your hands before, I recommend everybody do it once to experience it, all right? Yeah, don't get it on your clothes. No. All right. So what I'm going to do, and if you guys have questions through this, like banter, like I wanna have questions. I wanna kind of hear if you guys have anything if you guys are curious, if you have a question, somebody else probably has the same question. So speak up, okay? Is that a question? All right. So what I'm gonna do here. Remember I said tack back. So basically, when I seam this with the double sided, I need it to hold like that. Now, if it's in a certain scenario, it might not be as friendly. It might do something like that. So what you could do, you just take a strip here, and I take a strip here. Now I'm gonna let that dry out a little bit. So whenever we're using this primer, you guys can use the knuckle test. That's what they call it. Basically, it needs a certain amount of time to set up so that you can actually use the cover tape, seam tape stuff on top of it. What you do is you need to put your knuckle on there, and it shouldn't be able to slide, right? So see how it's kind of sliding on me right there? This stuff should actually grab it, and then it really shouldn't leave any residue on your finger. Like it should kind of be a clean finger at the end of it. Because like if I was to stick my finger in there, that stuff is not coming off. It's gonna be a mess. But if I stick my knuckle on there and roll it and it sticks, but it doesn't actually come back, right? We're probably good. Whereas this right here, see how wet that is? That's just totally sliding through. That's not good. That's not ready. See how it actually came off on my knuckle right there? All right, so this should be enough for what we're trying to do here. So the tack back, all it does is it holds your liner. Nice and easy, right? So if you guys ever need an extra set of hands, if you don't have clamps, this is a great way to do it. Just use the primer to actually tack it back. You can even, so if we're doing like a overlap over a bib liner or something like that that's on top of a reservoir, it doesn't need to be watertight. You can actually just slap down primer and connect these two things together, and it would work for certain scenarios like that, okay? Not watertight, but it'll hold those two pieces of liner together pretty well. All right, so now we got the surface prep. It's cleaned everything off. You can see it really takes away a lot of that that dust look, and it kind of gives it a certain darkness to it, right? That basically is that cleaning process. We made sure that this is nice and clean so that we can apply our double-sided seam tape here. So this is so you can see this is the double-sided seam tape here, where half of it is exposed, the other half has the wrapper on it. So I had to individually wrap each one of those up for you guys. Hopefully you guys appreciate that. Took a lot of time. Okay. All right. So when we do this, what we'll do is we need to prep this surface. Probably pick one of them first. So we're going to do this guy first, and then we're going to lay this down over the top of there. And then to do that, we need to use this stuff on top. So anytime we're applying this tape material to the liner, the primer needs to go on first, and then it needs to set up, just like we were talking about for this stuff over here, okay? So what I do, and again, we can use fabric, we can use a brush. Best case scenario is a scuff pad. Especially when you're getting to like the surface prep stuff, using a scuff pad, if you have an old pond that you're working on where we need to seam on, using that is really going to help to break up the material that's left on there. So whether that's mineral deposits, whatever, really helps to break that stuff down to give it a nice clean surface to work on. Same applies here. If we can apply the primer with the scuff pad, it's best case scenario, there's a little abrasion that happens, and it helps to give everything a little more grasp. So what I'll do, and I don't want too much, but not too little, right? So I'm gonna take it, and I'm just gonna apply it back and forth. I don't wanna be too out of control. I'm not coming all the way over here. If you go over a little bit from where the tape is gonna be, that's okay. But ideally, we're gonna make sure we're kind of within the range of where the tape should be. We don't wanna overwork it too much. We just want a nice amount on there. All right, can you guys see that? Does that make sense? Is there any questions, anything I should clarify at this point?
Why don't you do the other side at the same time?
We can, but I'd rather wait. Like technically could I? Yes, and then we could let it set up. I'd rather get this on and then make sure everything's working, and then I would move to that side.
Cool.
So,
I mean, here you're in a controlled environment. There's no dust flowing or leaves falling. When you're doing a longer seam, you're going to want to do one side with a double seam tape like that. Do the one side, put that tape down, and then prime the other side so you're not contaminating that.
That's a really good point. So basically the contamination is one of the most common factors for failure. So when we're out in the field working, we typically work in like about 3 foot sections, right? So we'll seam 3 feet and then move on, and then 3 feet and then move on. Because as you're working, dust, construction, you have excavators running, whatever it is, that dust all blows and then it kind of causes failure from your seams getting contaminated or the primer getting contaminated.
And a common misconception that people have is that primer's a cleaner. And it's not a cleaner, it's actually chemically bonding the liners together. So On a sloped roof, if they ever use EPDM on like a really low pitch roof, they won't even put the tape on. They'll just put that primer on there, and it acts just like Trevor was saying, where you're doing a waterfall where you don't have to worry about the water wicking back up. They'll just do
They'll just
a
like
primer
tack
between
it. Yep.
But underwater, you don't want to do that.
All right, so the next step, I'm gonna actually have you hold this. So if you're working with a couple guys, this is more a real life scenario. So if you hold it on one side and hold it taut. So I'm gonna basically hold this, and we need this really taut. As soon as this touches that primer, it's stuck, right? Oh, one thing I should do, I know because I've done it so many times, but this is good, right? See how my knuckle sticks now? And it's kind of got a nice pull to it? We're good. That's okay. If it was to start sliding, no bueno. You gotta wait for it to kind of set up a little more. So he's gonna apply pressure. I don't want this touching. So if I let go of the pressure and this touches here, that's stuck. That's not coming off. So we gotta be very careful at this point to make sure that we got pressure. And then I'm gonna start all the way over here. I'm gonna make sure we're lined up. So I'm gonna talk to him and I'm gonna be like, hey, Matt, are we lined up? Is this straight? You know, making sure that we're kind of in line with our seam, but also where the primer is. So there's a lot of things to consider. It's a little bit of a stressful scenario, okay? So I think we're good here. How does it look over there? It's good here. It's pretty straight. So I'm gonna start to tack it down. Now, what I'll also do is I'm gonna kind of start working my way from the center and out. As you go through longer seams, you might have to communicate with your guy and have him like, hey, we're slightly gonna turn this one way or turn this the other way. Because as you go through longer seams, you're gonna get off kilter a little bit. And as you go down 10 feet, you're really off kilter. So if you prime some of that area, or if your liner only goes so far, right, you run into issues. So that's another point that I didn't really bring up earlier, but having more overlap gives us more flexibility to have changes in the direction as you go. All right, so I'm kind of starting through the center, working my way out a little bit, making sure we're hitting all the primer. All right, looks pretty good. All right, go ahead and turn it a little bit. Not too much, so we don't want folds and stuff in all right, so there you go. We got the one applied. The next step, I'm actually going to take the razor blade. I'm going to cut it. So that's where the rollers come in. So you can see this will work nice. You just kind of quickly go over it, roll it. Again, on a roof, it's going to be really easy. Sometimes it'll be easy in the field, sometimes not so much. So if you can use this, great. If not, you're going to have to really go through and make sure you meticulously are pushing on this constantly. I recommend if you can have one of these on the truck. Our team has a seaming kit, right? So they have a whole pack out that's dedicated to seaming materials. So our guys will just have these in their pack out ready to go. If they use it, great. If not, then they don't. Same with the brushes and all these different materials. So if you guys are foremen, that's something I would recommend. They have a kit for kind of everything. Biofalls, seaming supplies, you know, whatever it is.
I will say, despite my best effort, I got a little crooked on that too. So
it's hard to keep in the line. So if you're doing a 20-foot seam, it's rough. You got to really kind of pay attention and make sure you're looking at things and the team's communicating and all of that, right? All right. So at this point, you can see we got that there. We're about at this point where we need to start to work on this one. So what I'll do, I'm going to take this. So I put the lid back on there. Kind of take note of that. Anytime you could close this. I probably should have poured it in one of these, but just for example, when you guys do it, we'll pour it into these. I'm just going to do it out of the can. So the next step, I'm going to take it, and you can see, so I have my little ridge line right there, so as I fold it back, it's going to fold right over the top, okay? So I'm applying more primer.
are you trying to make sure there's no puddles on that?
Yeah, I don't want puddles. I want enough to where it looks wet, right? But I don't want a big glob that's going to take forever to dry and cause issues. It's just better to kind of do it as a nice, even, medium, thinnish layer. And I also don't want to go too crazy. And again, like as soon as this folds over, this liner would stick to the other liner. I'm probably going to cut some of this away to kind of reveal some of that. And you guys will see what I'm talking about here in a second. So again, we're going to let this sit up, make sure that it's dry enough so that it actually bonds to this double-sided seam tape right here, okay? Any questions yet?
What's the overlap should I shoot for?
Like, meaning how far do I?
2 pieces. What's the overlap? Like the 2 pieces of shot?
So typically, really, you just need to make sure you hit this 3-inch. So what I'll show you, as soon as we do this, I can actually cut away any excess. So you just got to make sure that both pieces can get this double-sided seam tape, which is 3 inches. Sometimes it might be less, right? Like if you're really stretching or things start to get off kilter by the end of your seam, there might only be like a little bit of this covered, but as long as you have a seal between this and this, we're going to be okay. So there's a little bit of flexibility there, but really you want to make sure the entire piece of liner and all the primer is actually covering that cover tape, and then we'll cut away extra, and then we're going to cover it with the cover tape. So then I'm going to go through and check it again. It looks pretty good. My knuckle's not sliding. All right. So then, actually I'll kind of, so because it's inside and in a controlled scenario, like I could rip this off and easily fold it back, but I'll kind of show you a little bit more of a real world scenario for us, where you're going to have potentially 20 feet of this rolling in one way, and so you got to do it little by little so that things don't fold over and stick, because now, as soon as I release this, if this folds over and sticks, it's not a big deal because it's actually covered by that tape stuff, right? But if I didn't have that tape on there, it's immediately going to stick, and that's sitting where that is. There's no going back. So the main thing we need to start focusing on at this point is I cannot have any folds or wrinkles in this area. So as soon as there's a wrinkle, I'm sure you guys can kind of make sense of it, but as soon as there's a little bevel in that, what happens to the water? Travel straight through and you got a leak, right? So the idea is to make a seal nice and flat across this entire surface, okay? So I'm going to try to do this with, all right, let's go. So what you're going to do is you're going to start to bring this over. And so what happens is a little bit of this tape is going to get pulled, and at the same time we're going to almost follow and kind of start to actually seal that down little by little as you go. And that tape being removed little by little allows for you to kind of work in sections. Does that make sense? So then I'm going to keep pulling, and I might have the liner, and then he's going to work it from one side outward. Go ahead. Yep. And again, we put enough primer on there so it's actually going to cover the whole thing. And then being careful not to make this all touch. Good, good, good. You're going to work it this way. You're almost working from the center outward every time. If you think about it that way, it helps you to, almost like, you guys know when you put a new cover on your screen for your phone and you have to work all those bubbles out, like think about it the same way. You kind of work from one corner outward, and it really helps to make sure that the pressure is applied and pushes all those potential issues out. So we got it all sealed. Next thing, again, coming back with the roller. Super quick. Pretty easy, just making sure that everything is actually sealed down nice and tight. Then I can actually pull a wire. So again, surface prep, cleaning things up a little bit.
It's okay to have some residue there.
Yeah, because we're just going to slap more residue on top. All right, so you can see I'm going to start peeling this back a little bit. Again, I'm not going to yank on it too hard. It can only take so much weight. Sorry, now I'll flip it over. Maybe I should have done it that way. That might be helpful for you guys to see. So you can see I'm going to start peeling it back, and at a certain point it's going to stick, right? And that's where our double-sided seam tape is. So then I stop, because I could keep yanking it and it's going to pull it apart, right? It's only made to apply so much pressure before it breaks. So I'll pull it apart basically where the primer is attaching to the other primer on the liner. As I pull that apart, you can kind of see where that double-sided cover tape is. The next thing I can do is I take my blade and I can actually start to cut away the little bit of extra. It's a little difficult from this angle, but you guys get the point. Alright, so I'm starting to cut away all that extra scrap liner that could potentially interfere with our cover tape that's going to go over the top.
If you had that little amount of overlap, would you still cut it away?
I do. I always like to. You could probably get away with not. But I think it's a best practice if you do. Just so that you can see kind of where everything lines up. And then you're applying, you're going to apply this over the top of it so you just get a better seal. All right, make sense? Cool. All right, so then the last step is kind of the easy part. We're now going to take the same process that we just did, but we're going to do it with a single-sided tape this time. So then we're just coming over the top, and again, redundancy, and we're going to make sure that it's really sealed up by applying this stuff. So like I said, there are some cases where we might only use this one because it's going to be a lot easier. Like if it's a stream, if it's a shallow stream, I've done seams like this with only this. I don't need the double-sided for every single application. Now, is that best practice? Not necessarily, but in a pinch, it'll help you out. Same with overlaps. In overlap, this is great. It'll help hold liner. It'll make it watertight, so water can't wick up and cause a leak and say behind a waterfall or something. But overall, if you could do a double-sided and a cover tape, especially underwater in like a pond scenario, it's really good practice, okay? All right, so the cool thing about this, we already know how long it is. We can easily cut this guy ahead of time. So I'm just gonna cut this right now.
Do you usually put a new blade when you're getting ready to do this?
Yes, that's a good point. So anytime you're doing liner type stuff, like have new blades on deck, right? Like I like these Milwaukees that have additional blades down below, just because I can have 3 brand new blades and not have to keep going back and forth and dumping. But especially with this stuff, like we don't want a bunch of jagged edges. We want nice clean cuts, and especially this is really thick and sticky. So as soon as you try to cut it with a dull blade, it's not going to go through. It's just going to start to move and tear stuff and do really weird things. So a clean, fresh blade is pretty important.
So we typically use like heavy scissors.
That's fine.
Patches and stuff.
Yep, you could definitely use something like that, right? We got some heavy duty scissors we were using to cut it last night. Usually blades are just on deck for us, but if you have scissors and you're willing,
Yeah,
like,
we typically have patches or it's
perfect.
safety.
Exactly. All right. So, like I said, last one here. What we need to do is kind of make sure this is centered, right? So I'm looking at it, I'm making sure that relatively we're kind of having a center line here. It's always good while you're going through this process, if I forget to explain, to make sure as you're sealing it, or as you're working as a team, right, that we're actually following a center line, which also, by cutting that liner away, helps us to follow, like, all right, where is the center of the seam happening? Because if you had a lot of overlap and you seam it over here, water can still get through the sides, you still got a problem potentially, right? So basically follow that center line the best that you can, and then your guy, as you're kind of applying this, you can kind of guide it a little bit. There's a little bit more give to this stuff, so you can kind of manipulate it as you go. The most important part is this little dark black reveal right here needs to be sealed. So basically that is where the water cannot get through it. No different, so if we had something like that, not holding water, right? Water is going to travel right through there. So making sure that little reveal, this little black section, is completely seated along all edges is going to create our watertight seal. So same process. I think I already cleaned it with the surface prop, but I'll do it one more time just to show you guys how cool. So really quick, we're going to clean this up. Make sure it's nice and fresh, get all the dust and stuff. It's not a bad practice to just keep cleaning it, because if dust and stuff blows on there because the excavator's running or whatever, then you could potentially have problems.
If you get a wrinkle in that double-sided tape,
Yeah.
can you mush that kind of out of it, or is that?
Sometimes. So sometimes you can. Sometimes it might take, like if it's a really bad mistake or something happens where we're a little concerned, we might have to do like an overlap of this stuff, which is called technically like a T-joint, right? So basically we would take cover tape. We're not really going to get into that too much today, but you can actually get over the top of it and kind of redo a seal over the top of all of this stuff again. Again, the most important part is the little part that just stuck to me. If that's sealed, we're going to be good, okay? All right, so we clean this up. We're going to apply the primer again. Any questions yet? Anything? So I'm going to go here. Another thing too, as you guys are doing this, you can use like a grease pen and actually mark out where this stuff goes. I don't have a grease pen today, and it's a pretty straightforward seam, but if you get some weird angles and shapes happening, that grease pen really helps you to align some stuff to make sure you can follow exactly where this needs to sit. Because again, like if I'm trying to guide it right on that center line, it's going to be easy to get off kilter, and then by the end of the project, it's a problem, right?
How long does that have after it's tacked up before you have to do something else, reapply, and can you reapply?
You can reapply, but I'm pretty sure you can just, like as long as the primer's there and it's clean, you can use it. I would say it should still be tacky just from my experience, so I would reapply after it's super, super dry. But I think...
If you do it in small sections.
Yeah, exactly. But technically, I don't think you actually need it to be super tacky. I think it just needs to be clean. And again, I'm going to look at this and make sure it's pretty close, but a little bit over, because I don't want to have to deal with a bunch of sticky liner on my project. Alright, so then we're going to let that sit for a little bit. Nice. Sometimes it's nice to almost reverse roll this stuff, like our guys will reverse roll it. It's a little easier to apply with a longer strip, because then you get one guy kind of holding it and the other guy just kind of unrolling it and applying pressure. For this, it's not going to be a big deal. Like you could kind of just easily lay it out, but just keep in mind that's a little tip that you can use. A little too sticky, you can see it kind of came back on my finger. The knuckle's not really rolling that much, but it's still coming back a little too much on the finger. So one of the big things with this dry time process, right, or cure time, whatever you want to call it, a lot of it has to do with water and humidity and condensation happening, right? So basically, if it's really, really wet out, it's going to potentially have problems setting up. It might take longer, and then you could potentially have issues with it actually attaching. The other thing too is temperatures. So if you're working in really, really cold conditions, this stuff loves heat. Like basically we should be working definitely above freezing temperatures. I think ideally between 60 and 90 degrees or something like that. So if you guys have to, like guys on the roofing, in the roofing industry will set up little heat boxes to make sure the seam that they're working on is concealed and heated up to the proper temperatures. One of the bigger things is making sure that this stuff is heated up, so you don't want it super cold. If you let it sit in your truck, it heats it up and kind of make sure it's activated right. And the other thing too is if you're doing it in rainy temperatures or rainy conditions, setting up a tent and then just being conscious of like really got to double check these seams. because that condensation in the atmosphere, the humidity, whatever it is, science things, those actually can cause some problems for your seams as well. All right, so we look pretty good here. All right, so then I'm gonna do this sideways with you again. So I'm gonna have you hold this. I'm actually gonna start. Not with the gloves, hold on. The surface prep is my main concern. So I'll have you kind of grab that. Now slowly remove it as I kind of talk you through it. So we're going to line this up. So you can see he's got a big job here. He needs to make sure it's lined up straight. He's kind of pulling the liner, and then I'm just really going to position this and work it in. So I think we're pretty straight there. How do you look?
Looks pretty good here.
So there we go. I'm going to seat it down a little bit. And what I'm doing there is I'm kind of working it in. So again, from the inside outward, it gives us more flexibility with having errors and working them out. So if you go, I'm not applying too much pressure in any direction. It's a little bit of a balancing act. You're working it in, you're not pulling too much. Oh, there he goes. He's always pulling it. That's good. So here, see, working it outward. A little less pressure. There you go. So I'm keeping that center line, so you can see as I'm feeling it, I can feel that center line right there in the middle there. I'm kind of working that out. Now what I'm also doing is, see how this liner's kind of beveling a little bit? I'm doing my best to make sure that we don't get any weird folds and stuff. We're going to continuously work through that, making sure we're staying in line with all the primer that we put down. So really quick right here, I want to show you guys something. If we have pressure on this, he can actually take this stuff and stretch it a little bit. So I want you to stretch it that way a little bit. So see how there's a little bit of give to this? You guys can actually manipulate this a little bit as you're working through. Now it gets tricky because then you got to actually force all those bubbles and wrinkles and things out, but I can actually almost curve it if you apply pressure in the right way and then still seat it down. Easier said than done on a table versus in the field, but it can be done. All right, kind of working through, still working center out, boom. Oh, fold there, we can work that out. There's a little bubble in there.
Dropped it too.
So there's a little bubble in there, but that's okay. It's all encapsulated within our seal. Remember what I said, is this right here is the most important part. So the next thing I'm going to do, and it might actually work out because it's still fresh. Nope. But overall, the main point here is to make sure that it's all encapsulated on those edges, right?
Couldn't that bubble actually like over time push underneath where that seal is?
I don't think so. I think we're going to be good because we basically have the seal here. We've got that much there, that much there, so we should be pretty good. If you're really worried about it, you could actually probably pop it and then patch over the top. But something like that, I'm not super concerned with. You might still be able to work it out.
Put cover tape over top of the cover tape is the exact same.
The important part is this little reveal right there. So making sure that that's the seal. So like basically I need to, when I do that, you'll make sure that this seats down right there where that meets and overlaps extremely well. And then also all of this meets down really well. The other thing we can do is after that, in the roofing industry, what they'll do is they'll actually cut circle patches and put it over there again, and then they're making sure where that meets and that, so it's almost like a redundancy factor, right? Every time you have the ability for water to get through a certain joint, we're making sure that it's sealed up with this little reveal being sealed really, really well. Does that make sense?
The circle patches don't have the edge reveal, do they?
I don't think so, no. And those are just like regular patches you'd slap on to kind of get the job done quickly. All right, so there you go. I don't know, that's pretty good. Any thoughts? Anything you guys picked up on that? From this or no? Cool. Any questions before we get started? Because now all of you guys are actually going to do it. No? All right, so what I want you guys to do is, how many of us are there? 1,